Hello, rollers. Hello, friends, family, and everyone else, and everyone in between. Welcome back to another episode of Classin' Up the Joint. I am your host, Colin. I use they and he pronouns. I am joined once again by fabulous guest. Fabulous guest, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Clarke Peterson. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the founder of Speaks and Spells Publishing, and a TTRPG designer working primarily, historically, in the Level Up Advanced 5th Edition space, or A5E, for those of us in the community. Although recently, I've been gearing up towards a much bigger project called Wild Magic Reimagined, which is not only for A5E, but also for D&D, both 2014 and 2024 edition, as well as Tales of the Valiant. So we're really trying to bring everyone into the fold in this new initiative.
Yeah.
We'll tell you a little bit more about all that later, I assume.
That is very much the plan. Clarke, welcome to the show. Thank you for
I'm so thrilled to be here. Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Something that I have usually asked, and I actually haven't even had the opportunity in a while because I haven't been talking to someone brand new. What was it about D&D or whichever RPG it was that grabbed you at whatever point in your life that kind of brought you first steps on this journey?
Yeah, so it was D&D. And like a lot of other people, I mostly came into D&D in 2020 during the pandemic. Unlike a lot of other people, I got to play in person during that time.
Awesome.
Yeah, what happened was my wife and I had just gotten engaged. We got the apartment that we were going to move into and we were married. But before that arrangement was going to happen, we needed someone to sort of fill the gap period. I put out an ad on Facebook. Exactly one person responded. And that person is now one of my best friends, as well as his wife, who was his girlfriend at the time. But anyways, they come down. We become roommates. He vets us for a little bit, doesn't immediately jump into this, but before too long, pitches us on doing a D&D campaign. He had run several. His wife, then girlfriend, had been in several with him. So they knew the ropes. I had kind of heard about the space a little bit. Someone had half invited me to one over text that didn't really go anywhere at one point in the past. So I wasn't entirely unfamiliar with it. But it was really the first time that I was able to sit down and play the game properly. And it was my wife's first time entirely. And I just really quickly got hooked into it. And I think if we're going to link it even farther back, my undergraduate degree was in psychology because I liked so many things. But what led me to psychology was you know what? I want something that's sort of on the midpoint between philosophy and the humanities and these sort of larger questions that are very subjective and the hard science kinds of things. And role-playing games very much fit within a lot of that space. Where on one level, there's this absolutely the narrative component, and the story and the emotion and the themes that draw you in this great human tradition. But at the same time, math rocks go clickety clack and add up to fun numbers. And there's the statistical element and just how quickly I've learned to calculate dice probabilities in my head over the last couple of years.
Amazing.
Yeah. So then, he started us off in a little Eberron campaign, which was wonderful. And it wasn't too long before I was like, hey, how do you guys feel if I tried to one shot? Then I was like, okay, well, what if it wasn't a one shot exactly? What if it lasted a little bit longer? And likewise, very shortly after I got behind the screen, I was like, these monsters aren't exactly the way that I want them to be. And so I very quickly started homebrewing my own things just for my own table initially.
Yeah.
And then, before too long, I was looking for larger ways to go. And that would kind of segue into my introduction to Level Up Advanced 5th Edition, if we want to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say I'm so happy that someone you lived with during COVID is still a best friend because I feel like that is about a 1 in 4 chance based on the number of houses and people I know that split up
not
and
only
reabsorb.
Not only are they still best friend, my wife and I got married. We moved in together. He and his wife got married. They moved into their own apartment. We have since all collectively moved back into a joint house where we've been together for 2 years. Yes, we were just
That's
like,
awesome.
well, we keep going in over to each other's places anyways, and like we'd get more in like the real estate market co-renting a
Yeah.
house than we would two separate
Yeah.
apartments. So it's just been a really fantastic situation, and we've got like a really intentional like uh, community to live with,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
I love that.
So
So if I'm guessing possibly correctly that as you started homebrewing some of your own things for a table, eventually you found A5E and decided to both run some of that system and contribute to it. Is that sort of the next? Am I how psychic am I today?
kind of.
Okay.
So you know, I like many people. I even like living with people that I got to play with. I didn't get to play always as much as I wanted, and so spent a lot of time like reading the discords, like kind of getting into the whole meta world of D&D and the discussion around that. And started thinking about like what are things about the game that I do and don't like, and what would I want to change. And sort of offhand, my friend mentioned that's like, oh yeah, there's some people who are like playing around with a Kickstarter that's going to come out later,
Hmm.
where they're trying to re-emphasize some of the like social and exploration pillars of D&D, and I was like, huh,
Yeah.
interesting. And I wound up following that Kickstarter and pledged it, and eventually got the PDFs in hand. And the things that really struck me were first of all, um, the experience of like getting those PDFs and like reading them over the first couple of weeks was kind of like it was so clear that the people who had worked on this project knew and loved D&D and
Hmm.
had really intentional thoughts about like where it could be improved and where it could be enriched. Um, there were just little signals everywhere that's just like, oh yeah, people have talked about that on Reddit for ages, and like and they're adjusting that to be more balanced, or like yeah, that's been a sticking point. I've always wanted to play a strength-based monk, and now I
Hmm.
just can. um and it's not something I have to like homebrew around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there were so many little things that just added so many little hooks for someone who wanted to design. There were so many possibilities and things to grab onto, and nice little mechanics that made it really easy to come up with ideas. But then on
Hmm.
top of that, my thing always before had been like, well, I've got my thing for my table, but like I go and Google this thing, and like there's 6 other variants of it on like the Unearthed Arcana subreddit. Like people have
Uh-huh.
already like
Yeah.
there's so much that's I don't want to quite say oversaturated, because there's still a lot that wonderful creative people do every day. But as someone who was new to the system, and didn't feel like I
Right.
had my chops yet, I wasn't quite ready to make that plunge myself. But suddenly, like Level Up A5E comes along, and I'm like, oh, like they don't have a Genasi yet. I have my own thoughts
Uh-huh.
about how that should work.
Uh-huh.
Um, right? And so it's like, oh, the field is wide open. And like, not only is the
Yeah.
field wide open, but all the things that people have done already that have been so wonderful and have been favorite parts, like, I can be the first person in this system to do my take on those.
Hmm.
As it happens, I was not the first person in that system to do my take on the Genasi or elemental things. Um, there are other people who had similar kinds of thoughts. But it was
Uh-huh.
really encouraging to just be like, oh, the space is open.
Yeah.
And I really have the opportunity to say something new and to be the person who contributes that and who makes that contribution and impact and legacy there.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, but even so, another important part of this story is I think one of the best things about Level Up A5E as an ecosystem
Hmm.
is that the company that puts it out, EN Publishing, has a monthly periodical they do called the Gate Pass Gazette, where they take contributions from writers both inside and outside the company, and they'll put out like 4 little articles a month with new game content. Which means that first of all, like if you're just interested in playing, you've got a steady stream of new content
Hmm.
coming out on a regular basis. I kept spreadsheets on it for a while, and it wasn't very long before there were more official options for subclasses in A5E than there ever had been for
Uh-huh.
D&D 5th edition. Um, but also, like, I realized that I could send in submissions, and I was like, hey, here's some ideas that I have. The next time the pitch call came around, and it was a very important bridge for me because I wasn't sure that I was ready to self-publish, and also there's so many
Hmm.
other things that end up being involved in self-publishing, like
Oh,
setting up your
absolutely.
own separate business
You
and like
wear
learning
every
layout
single
and
hat that you possibly have. Yeah.
every single
Yeah,
hat.
it's
And
a
I
lot.
keep getting more hats. And it's starting to teeter a little bit, if I'm being honest.
Uh-huh.
But in that moment, it's just like I'm just a designer, and there's an editor on the other end who will slap my hand if I do something stupid before it gets out
Yeah.
to the world. Um, but they did. They took that first article that I submitted because the first time round, if you're a new designer, they always only take one submission.
Right.
But then the next time round, they took the maximum number of submissions that they would take from one person from me, and I was like, yes, they actually did like my stuff. I can do this. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and then through that, I got to know like other writers for that system. We all have most of the people in that community who are designing for Level Up Advanced Fifth Edition are on a common Discord server together, where
Right.
we talk and interact, and give feedback on each other's work and get coaching on like some of the nuts and bolts of things. And so from there, I had the next step to sort of put out my first own little supplement and test the waters, and then did a larger thing, and now I'm trying to do a much larger thing, which is Wild Magic Reimagined. But we can circle back to that.
It seems like a huge thing. I am very excited to circle back to that, but I want to talk a little bit about A5E more because we've talked about it a little bit on the show, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how much I remember and what might have changed in that. So, and of course, subjective opinions are what we are all about all the time.
Yes.
So what is it that you think Level Up really improves on as a system over 5e? Are there
Yeah, so there are a
specific
number of
mechanics or
things.
specific things, but besides, I guess, the openness of the ecosystem and allowing
Yes. Yeah,
much
that was a
easier entry
meta.
to publishing for sure.
Yeah, a more
Yeah,
meta question about it. And then there's the question of like, well, what does it actually give to the consumer?
yeah,
I have a lot of the same things to say that Steampunkette did, which I think just goes to say that like, yeah, those were actual improvements and not someone's
yeah,
subjective opinion.
totally.
The improvement to combat options for marshals is an absolutely huge thing. The fact that there's different combat traditions that really not only give you like interesting things to do in combat without resorting to magic, but that also can reinforce the flavor of your class,
Hmm.
or your subclass or whatever character you're trying to play. Huge deal. Um, for me, though, the thing that really makes it sing in my soul is
Yeah,
the way that they take the non-combat portions of the game really seriously. And to be clear, I love the combat portions of the game, right? I was always a
absolutely.
little bit disappointed if we got through a session. It's just like, oh, it was a really great roleplay session. I did want to stab something though. Yeah,
Who does
but
it?
who doesn't? Um, but I'm thinking about, my I love playing with my wife. She's a wonderful person. She is one of those people who struggles to be creative in a vacuum. She
Hmm.
needs things to go off of. She says, like, I sometimes don't know what my character would be doing in this situation. And
Sure.
Level Up A5E, like, has, first of all, just baked in non-combat utility things for every single class as part of the class, and then also takes that
Mm.
seriously with the subclass and with the systems that support it. Um, One of the things that I got to do that was one of my favorite projects to work on was I got together with about 10 other designers, and we so a major part of I should back up. A major part of the way that Level Up A5E includes these kind of non-combat supports are through things that have no unified name in the actual game, but that the community has sort of resolved on calling exploration knacks.
Hmm.
And they are just little, like almost half a feat's worth of abilities that just give you something meaningful to do outside of combat and that reinforce the flavor of your class.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you are, let me pull up one here. Like there's one where, okay, let's take clerics and let's take the way that
Sure.
you know, they have access to the spell Speak with Dead. Let's expand that a little bit and say, like, hey, if you take this particular exploration act, you get ancestral guidance. You can cast Speak with Dead on a painting, right?
Wow. Uh-huh.
Yeah, or on a coin, or like anything that depicts a dead person. And you always have it prepared. Or let's say, like, you are playing a strength based, or let's say a dexterity based. What would in D&D would be a monk. What would
Sure.
Level Up A5E has renamed an adept, just
Hmm.
sort of broaden the class concept. They say like, okay, well, like you're dexterity based, but like you really like should be good at a lot of athletics things. Well, let's just give you an exploration knack that lets you make your athletics checks with dexterity, right?
Uh-huh.
Or a particular one that I wrote, and this is where I was going with this. I got together with a
Yeah.
bunch of designers, and we got together and wrote 100 of these as new ones to expand the system. But I was like, I want to be a wizard, and I want to have that moment where I'm like talking to Frodo and counseling him and saying, it's like, there are many who have deserved to die, right? But like, and have that moment of being, etymologically a wizard, etymologically wise. But I'm an intelligence based character, and if I'm investing in wisdom, that's things away from my combat. So it's like, let's just
Sure.
let wizards use intelligence on insight checks to help reinforce that fantasy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? Or another one that a friend did was they harken back to the ancient Roman idea of like the centurions like building these bridges and fortresses. And so they made an act called Built in a Day, where if you're a fighter, you can like set up these little structures like walls and forts and watchtowers that will only last so long, but it empowers you to have these really flavorful and distinctive non-combat moments that give you something interesting to do in the game. I
Yeah.
think that you know lots of people have talked about the tension of like D&D so often, and a lot of other systems as well, as including several of the other like heroic fantasy systems that have come out. A lot of them focus really hard on like giving you interesting things to do in combat and then leaving exploration and social pillars really open, which can be fun for roleplay, but it also kind of tells you like if you're a fighter and you look down at your character sheet and you don't see anything that tells you that you have something interesting to do in a social interaction, what that's
Yeah.
implicitly telling the player is that like this part of the game is not for you. And that's just not true, and it shouldn't be true.
I agree. I think it says something about the game designers as well when it is, something is clearly a combat simulator, and they're like, oh right, there I guess there's things where you're also not necessarily going to be in combat. We have to do something. Here you go.
Yes,
Don't
and
look at it too closely.
it's one of those things where it's like another heuristic that I've developed in my years of designing is that when answering questions about like what makes for a good game, you sometimes have to ask, am I wearing my designer hat or am I wearing my game master hat?
Sure.
Because frequently a question will be answered, well, it's like, oh, well, a good game master would always come up with a way around that. Like a good game master would give a fighter or a monk like interesting things to do outside of combat. But like as a designer, I can't assume that you have a good game master. Like I should never, and
It's true.
even so, like as a designer, even if you do have a good game master, why am I making more work for them?
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally fair. It is, there's some terrifying choice paralysis when you just have a completely open field of options as a game master, and you're supposed to just figure out something and hope your players are happy when whatever game you're running has just been like, here you go. Try something. Throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks.
Yes.
Yeah. How difficult is it to kind of like learn A5E or to integrate it into your existing games, as I guess both 5E of 2014, 2024, or Tales of the Valiant, if those are all similar enough to the things that you're expanding on in A5E?
Yeah, great question. I think a useful analogy here is different dialects of English. They're all
Mm-hmm.
using basically the same language. They all have the same basic math behind them. I have several times wanted to use A5E options with other people running the game who did not know A5E and weren't interested in learning it for me. And so they were saying, we're running D&D for everyone else, but we will let you have an A5E character. And I've several times had A5E characters playing in the same adventures
Mm-hmm.
as normal D&D characters.
Sure.
You would probably run into, I haven't played in parallel with Tales of the Valiant, but I think it would be pretty similar based on everything that I know about how those rules work. There are going to be moments of friction.
Mm-hmm.
Little things like, to go back to the language analogy,
Yeah.
quite is an intensifier in American English. If something is quite fun, it's very fun. In British English, it is not, right?
Mm-hmm.
If something is quite
Yeah.
fun in British English, it's not very fun at all.
Yeah.
And there's
Sure.
similar little hiccups. So like a quick one that I think would come up that people wouldn't necessarily anticipate is in D&D and Tales of the Valiant, grappling is contested acrobatics athletics, right?
Yeah.
Level Up Advanced Fifth Edition has grappling be a saving throw. So it's just one of those little
Okay.
things where if you're gonna have someone grapple, like you should have had that conversation in advance, ideally, and known it was there. I don't
Sure.
think anyone's made like a proper cheat sheet for people who are wanting to integrate those, and that would be a decent project that I'm sure one of my friends listening to this project will jump on,
Yeah.
and I can already think of
Yeah.
who. But
And come on the show and tell us about it. We'll
yeah.
we'll do that later. Um, yeah, I mean, I love the dialect analogy because I think it's and English is not the only language where the same word in different regions just means
Mhm.
drastically different things. Um,
Yes. But
yeah,
to recap really quickly, I
sure.
think that if you come into A5E with your primary experience being D&D or Tales of the Valiant, you're going to see most of the differences. As I would probably say the same thing with like Tales of Valiant versus D&D, you're going to see most of
Hmm.
the differences before you get to the table. You're going to see it in the way that
Yeah,
like classes are built, in the supports that are available for DMs, and then once you're actually at the table, most of the other things are going to fall into line, and the things that won't are usually things that can be reconciled without too much difficulty.
yeah, yeah. Cool. Yeah, I've been feeling in myself the utter terror of trying to learn new systems when I'm like, I have spent so long and 5e is kind of in
Right?
my brain.
Right? And this was a
It's
big part of the reason that like I was willing to try level up because
yeah,
when I started, I was like, I've only known D&D, and like the only other one that I'm really aware of at this point is Pathfinder, and that's like a whole other can of worms that I don't want to learn right now. But I'm like, oh, I can learn something that's like explicitly supposed to be backwards compatible, and where I don't have to get
yeah,
rid of all my old books.
yeah,
So like that was an important bridge as far as what moved me sort of from D&D into level up.
yeah, totally. I uh I think to me that begs the question of like someone who is wanting to make that switch or at least contemplating it, where should they go for resources and or PDFs and books to make that switch?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, one marvelous thing about Level Up, and this is kind of a secret weapon, is that they are really, really big into open gaming and making all of their materials available for free. You can find
Love that.
not only like pretty much everything in the core rules on the website a5e.tools. I'll say that one more time, a5e.tools, but as well as like a lot of the stuff published in the Gate Pass Gazette and links to a bunch of third-party products. In addition, Level Up has a really weird situation. Weird is maybe the wrong word. A really generous situation with its licensing. Level
Hmm.
Up is under a triple license. It is under the OGL, it is under the ORC license, and it is under Creative Commons.
Wow.
Right?
Well done.
And like the SRDs are very generous,
Yeah.
and they've added things to the SRDs that weren't in the original core books as well. So like all of that information that you want to initially get into it is available for free. And then if you want something to like not just consume all of this in a little chamber by yourself, but actually see, okay, if you have questions about it and are confused, the EN World there are EN World Discord servers. There's
Hmm.
several. But the EN World online forum has a whole level up channel with a really engaged
Hmm.
community that would be more than happy to give you their answers, their questions, and give you their thoughts.
Yeah. Amazing. I love that everywhere that I've gone within D&D and the world larger RPG world outside it, the community is more or less the same in that everyone wants to like hang out and be friends and invite you in
Yeah,
rather than
absolutely.
mostly rather than gatekeeping. I've been lucky or like we've kind of moved past that in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, gatekeepers get weeded out because you know what? They're not having as much fun as the rest of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Fuck them. Um, um, I think one of the last things I want to think about with A5E is kind of the comparison to D&D and to the 2024 edition specifically.
Yeah.
If you've looked at some of the changes and has the 2024 update borrowed anything from A5E? Do you think any of those changes that have been made are comparable in any way?
Yeah, so there are some significant things. And again, I'll reiterate some of the things that Steampunk had said.
Yeah.
So like steps forward, a thing that it has in common with A5E is moving the ability score increases out of race slash
Hmm.
species, or what A5E
Yeah.
would call your heritage, and into your background.
Yeah.
And making it so that like these things that you excel in are because of your choice and not because of your circumstances in life.
Hmm.
That's a positive step. And then of course weapon masteries, all the new weapon features that were added in D&D
Yeah.
2024 is, I think, an important step forward to making marshals a fully engaged part of the game and giving them
Hmm.
interesting things to do. It's not as in depth, but that being said,
Sure.
like it also doesn't have to be. Like not every game needs to have the same level of complexity as a game that has advanced in the name,
Yeah.
as I will
Yeah.
fully
Totally.
admit. That being said, there are other directions where I think that the 2024 rules have taken a step away from the direction that Level Up has
Hmm.
gone. And that, especially, I think, is with non combat utility. And you see it, I think, particularly in classes like the Ranger and the Monk, where a lot of their more flavorful abilities were stripped out of their class design, like
Yeah.
Timeless Soul for the Monk. Where it's
Yeah.
just like, was that important for combat? No. Are you getting like a cleaner class design? Yeah. But like also you're definitely losing something that told you as a player what the class fantasy was supposed to be and
Hmm.
gave you
Yeah.
these interesting incentives for role play. Um, and so that's a step in a different direction, not necessarily in a worse one. Again, like there are
That is
benefits to leaving that
very
slate
charitable
open.
of you.
I'm
Yeah.
writing. I mean, I'm trying to
Fair
sell to
enough.
like all of these systems, so I have to be
Yeah.
charitable in some sense.
Yeah.
But yes, it is something that is less to my taste. I will at the very
Yeah.
least say that.
I mean,
And it's supporting those kinds of things is important to me.
yeah, no, no, for sure. I mean, I'll go ahead and say I think objectively what they've done to Ranger is a travesty, and I'm very sad and annoyed about it because they were already much maligned.
Fun
Um,
part about Level Up's Ranger, it has no magic. It is a
say
straight
more,
shooting marshal.
please.
Yeah,
Okay,
they decided like, you know what, we're doing a radical departure. The Ranger is going to be non-magical. There are magical subclasses, so you can still
sure.
like bring in the magical Ranger fantasy if you want, but it's like, we're going to explore like a more strict like Aragorn sort of interpretation,
Hmm.
where you're much more of like a counterpart to a druid rather than like
Hmm.
half an imitation of a druid.
Sure. Wow, love that. Ranger's
Yeah.
finally getting some good treatment. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your mid-roll. It is I, your host, Colin, here to thank you once again for listening. It is so nice and so important, and it feels so good that you are here with us. And also to remind you that if you never want to hear me say that again, if you just are excited about the show, if you love what we're doing, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/The Roll Report, where also, for as little as a single dollar a month, you can submit questions for our interview guests. Only our friends and supporters on Patreon can submit questions, and only they will get to hear the answers. We've got some really incredible guests coming up as usual, and if you want to hear their answers to your questions, head on over to Patreon. Also, you can follow us on social media. We are at The Roll Report Cast on Instagram and TikTok, and now on Blue Sky. Ooh. Follow us there for announcements about upcoming guests once they have been booked, and then you will find out if you have interesting and amazing and unusual questions for all of them. But thank you so much for listening. That's really all. We are so grateful you're here with us and hope you are enjoying this episode. Back to the show. Uh, well, wrenching sideways slightly. I want to talk about Wild Magic Reimagined and
Yeah.
and get into that because I
I want
am
to talk about
so
it too.
excited about this.
Thanks.
I love Wild Magic. I think it is always one of the coolest things that you can do. I have told my one really horrible story about it a couple times, but it's mostly a story of a DM not quite thinking about everyone except the one Wild Magic sorcerer.
Hmm.
Um, so, big overview. What is Wild Magic Reimagined? What are you hoping to bring into the RPG space with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Wild Magic Reimagined is a dramatic expansion on the wild magic system that you know and love, and which in many ways is reverse compatible with wild magic systems that you're already familiar with. It is
Hmm.
a reimagination, not a reinvention. So you're going to see like a lot of the things that you are familiar with and love, but we're taking that and we're saying like, let's take this away from being a gimmick that and a toy that belongs to one subclass, and let's make it
Hmm.
a tool that can be added like not just to other player characters, but like as a really versatile tool for DMs. I'm really,
Hmm.
really excited to see what game masters do once they have hands on this tool, because I think there's a lot of really fun stories that you can tell with Wild Magic Reimagined that are just not that they're impossible, but they're harder to tell without access to this tool.
Yeah. Um, I love that. Yeah, and something that you've said that I agree completely. It shouldn't just be the property of the one class.
It's Wild Magic Sorcerers and Battlemaster Fighters that had like their ideas were too good.
Uh-huh.
They had brilliant ideas. People love those subclasses for a reason. Then that's why they shouldn't just be constrained to one
Yeah.
subclass.
Yeah. Share the love. Um, how so this the system as it is as you're expanding it is substantially different. I Different isn't even the right word that I'm thinking about right here. I'm like I'm interested in why you decided to do this besides sort of the hoarding within that one subclass, and your feelings about the current system that D&D uses, or that A5E uses, if they're the same.
No, yeah, absolutely. This is an important point because the actual like historical initial impetus for me was a little bit of shame. In that,
Ha.
like
Okay.
in so many ways, Level Up is a system where you're really impressed by like seeing the thing that you loved, and then people have added on to it.
Hmm.
And the one of the areas where it was lacking was wild magic. There is some wild magic like scattered in like some exploration things, and a couple of
Hmm.
magic items have their own limited tables. But like, there's not even a proper like 50 item wild magic table that you'd see in the
Wow.
2014 rolls or in Tales of the Valiant.
Okay.
They have sort of their own equivalent to the wild magic sorcerer that takes a different spin.
Sure.
But it's not the direction that they chose to go. In fairness, a lot of word count, as I'm finding out.
Yeah. Yeah. That
So I was just
tracks.
like, my thought was eventually, and it's like as I said, I was attracted to things that hadn't been done before. And so like,
Hmm.
I've had a couple years designing for the system. I've been talking to other friends. We're keeping track of each other's work, and I'm like, what we touched yet? And I was looking at wild magic, and I was like, this is embarrassing for us. Like, we're Level Up. We should have a cool wild magic system. We
Uh-huh.
should have one that's better than anything that exists right now. And so I started thinking about like, well, what would the best wild magic system look like?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, what does the best system look like, or how much do you want to reveal
I want to
before
reveal
the
so
release?
many things about what the best wild magic system looks like. And the answer is that it looks like a lot of the things that other people have come up with. The secret to Wild Magic Reimagined is not that I had a brilliant new idea as to what would
Hmm.
make wild magic work. It's that I saw 20 other people's brilliant ideas and said, like, why do I have to choose between all of these improvements? We can squish these all into one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so I'll sort of run through the major bullet points
Yeah.
of what what makes Wild Magic Reimagined so much different. The first point is that Wild Magic can be added to anything. Um, you can have a Wild Magic Owlbear. You can have a Wild Magic Rogue. You can have a Wild Magic Planet of Thunderstorms if you want. Right.
Awesome. Uh-huh.
We're not restricting it to one subclass.
Hmm.
Um, it is Wild Magic Reimagined also gives you the ability to theme your magic and flavor
Hmm.
it, so that if you've got 5 different characters at the table, you can give them all wild magic tables that are very different from each other and don't share effects. And that feel very distinct,
Awesome.
and like give you the sense that like, oh, all of these people have different kinds of magic, and it's breaking in different ways for each of them.
Hmm.
On top of that, I believe that big magic should make big boom. And if you are a wild magic sorcerer and
Always.
you are at the top of your game and you cast Meteor Swarm and it goes wild, why are you getting illusory butterflies around your head? Big magic makes big boom, not illusory
Uh-huh.
butterflies, right? Um, And so another important point was dividing up the different power levels of wild magic and allowing you
Hmm.
to scale things up as your characters grow, or
Sure.
introducing it immediately all at once if you're a sadist.
Hey, some DMs and some players be like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. There's so much of this that's just like we've given you the control. If you want it, you can
Yeah.
also disregard it. Right. Where
Yeah.
this is very much my guiding philosophy for Wild Magic Reimagined is I want to be giving people tools to tell their stories, not to tell
Sure.
mine.
I Something you said makes me a little curious how many tables of magic you had to generate if like trying to customize it for five different characters. Are there, you know, the all fire magic table versus
Yeah,
the
so I'm going to
only
hit on that in just a moment.
self-destructive?
I've got
Yeah.
one other major
Oh
bullet
yeah,
point to hit
please.
first. The other major bullet point, and this is some secret sauce that does a lot more than initially sounds like, and we can get into more of why later. But every effect in Wild Magic Reimagined has three variants. We call
Hmm.
them Wheel, Balanced, and Woe. But it's basically that has a version that benefits you, a version that harms you, and a version that is net neutral.
Hmm.
And that really lets you custom tailor whether or not you want wild magic to be a boon, a curse, or something in between.
Sure.
And that has some
Okay.
other knock on effects, which we can talk about later. But we're going to save
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And we can talk about the strategies as far as like how much do we have to generate.
Yeah.
Um, this is one of those things where it's like we should have a wild magic effect table with lots of effects because one of the first things that you feel dissatisfied about when you first open up your wild magic table is you finally get a chance to break up the D100s and then there's only 50 effects.
Uh-huh.
Right? So I knew right away, it's just like when I roll a wild magic table, I want 100 effects on it. But then the question is like, well, how many effects do I have to make in order to have as many options as I want, as many different abilities for customization,
Right.
and not make the book weigh 500 pounds and also have it delivered in 50 years.
Yep.
Um, and the answer to that was 700. Um,
Okay.
yes. And it's gotten pretty mathematical as to how exactly that works. But the basic idea is that every wild magic table, every wild magic effect is categorized into one of the five themes, one of the five like flavors of wild magic. Right. So off the bat, we knew we needed 500, like 100, a D100 table for each of those themes.
Sure.
Right. The way each of those tables is broken up is that there's a set of 20 that are really like true to the core of that flavor, right?
Hmm.
So for example, one of the flavors is virtue, and that's the holy divine magic. And we're going with like what is the most like clericy paladin like divine holiness that we can get, and we're squeezing it in that core of the table.
Yeah.
And then the other 80 are broken into another set of 20, and they each lean slightly into one of the other four themes. I imagine it's sort of like a flower with four petals.
Hmm.
All right.
Hmm. Yeah.
So if virtue is leaning towards passion, then maybe we're thinking about like, okay, what are the virtues that like invoke our emotions? So we're thinking about things that have to do with courage, and like beauty and music.
Yeah.
There's a virtue passion effect that makes the choirs of heaven suddenly audible to mortals, and like the beauty stuns everyone, right?
Amazing.
Or what about we're going into growth? We're leaning into sort of more of the nature side. It's like, well, this is a great place for talking about like healing and like innocence. There's another little wild magic effect that makes children love you.
Ha! Okay.
Yeah, right. And like leans into that direction. Or like another one of the themes is intellect. So like how does goodness interact with knowledge, right? So we've got things like, okay, well, the common thread there is one of truth, right? So we're going to put
Hmm.
like our prophecy effects over there. We're going to put our things
Uh-huh.
that allow you to communicate, sort of in that direction. And
Yeah.
then the last one, which is sort of the most interesting as far as the dichotomy, is corruption, right? Like what happens
Sure.
with holy and good magic when you have to have it touched by a little bit of evil, right? And sort of the direction that I went with this was like, well, that's to some extent like our daily experience, right? What are the ways that goodness has to react to evil? So, like, some of the punishing effects are there, right? Some of the
Hmm.
things that deal with condemnation for sins.
Yeah.
and dealing with the faults and failures of people and how goodness responds to that. I think there's one of the effects that makes you like suddenly very aware of all the things that you've done wrong and like tries to spur you to repentance and like you break down
Uh-huh.
crying,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So we've got so then each of the other themes has a similar sort of setup where they've got the
Right.
core set of effects and then the other 80 sort of like spread out from there. Okay. So another thing that I wanted to do is like, well, I really want you to be able to combine multiple themes. Because if you are like multi-class, let's say you multi-class in like you've got like a warlock druid, you should be able to take some of the corruption, like to emphasize like the dark evil side of your warlock, and then like also bring in the nature side
Yeah.
of your druid.
Yeah.
But like, so the way that I wanted to do that was like, okay, let's take the core of the corruption, let's take the core of the growth set. Let's take those two sets that sort of lean towards each other and let's stick them into one table. But if you're counting or keeping track at home, that's only 80 effects. And I'm like, no, 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 100 effects. 100 is a nice round number.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so what we needed was another set of, we needed 200 additional effects, 10 sets of
Right.
20 to provide for all of those possible two theme combinations and bridge them together. Right.
I love this.
Yeah. So then
Yeah,
it really gets to
that's
sing,
really
and it
cool.
also means that like you can explore all five of the main themes, and you still have like all 10 two theme combinations that have new effects that you've never seen before that you can continue to play with. So there's a
Yeah.
tons of replayability that's built into this kind of system.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I merely because I didn't hear it specifically mentioned, we've kept some things like casting fireball on yourself. Yes, some like really nice
So
explosive
yeah,
accidental
so
booms.
we've
Great.
got so yes, but I also want to talk about the way that we've adjusted that just a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah,
right? Because
please.
this is like the fireball thing needed to be in there. It's iconic,
Yeah,
right?
it's the
At the same
classic
time,
worst
it
case
is
scenario thing.
also it is also one of the ones that people complain about a lot because it kills parties like, in session 1, right? And so like what do you do with this thing that people really really love but
Yeah.
also has some significant drawbacks. So our solution to this is a good segue into, I mean, honestly, both tiers at both like the
Yeah.
scaling power level as well as like wheel balance and woe.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So first of all, I think I'll briefly describe the tier section. Basically, we've broken up all of the effects into 5 different power levels. So the first tier is equivalent to like level 1 spells and cantrips, and you can introduce those at level 1. They shouldn't ruin your day most of the time.
Uh-huh.
In other
Wild
words, like
magic
you shouldn't
sorcerer who
be,
casts fireball will not kill the entire party at level
yeah,
1.
because they're
Yeah.
they're not going to be casting that in theory until at least level 3,
Right.
right? Or if you want to push it later, you can.
Hmm.
Um, on the other side, like if you're up at the higher echelons of the game, to levels 15 to 20, like you need wild magic effects that feel like appropriate things to go wrong when you cast Meteor Swarm or Wish
Right.
um or Glibness, right? And so at levels 5, at the tier 5, we've got wild magic effects that roughly correspond to the power of 8th and 9th level spells. So every
Hmm.
tier is approximately like 2 levels worth of spells in range of power.
Right.
And what you can do is you can introduce those as your characters grow. And so, like, you're constantly getting a new stream of effects. You still at level 1, we've weighted it such that you got the majority of the effects available in tier 1. 40% of the effects are tier 1 effects because, like, you still cast cantrips at the highest levels of the game. You still need
Right.
lots of minor
Oh yeah,
effects.
definitely.
But so you're still getting a nice meaty wild magic table at level 1. And then you get to introduce new ones as you level up, and the magic becomes progressively more and more terrifying, right?
As it should
So
be.
that's one thing that we can do is that we have the ability. We've just given you the information as to like, hey, here's a rough categorization as to how strong this was. If you
Right.
don't want these in your game just yet, hold off. If you do want them in their game, you can bring them in early, right?
And
If
know that
Thrast
you
shows
might
up
then
session
have your
1
wild
with
magic
you've got
sorcerer kill the
your level
party.
1 characters,
Yeah.
like it can pull out the big boys right away. But it's your choice is the important thing.
Right. Right.
So then, getting back on track to Fireball. The other way that we've adjusted it is with wheel balance and woe effects. So the notion here is I try very much with all of the effects to make it feel like it is the same effect that's happening, um, but there's a variation on it that makes it good, neutral, or
Hmm.
harmful. Um, and they're like one of the common ways to do this is you cast a spell, and either the wheel version, the beneficial version, you get to
Hmm.
choose where it goes. So you cast fireball, you roll wheel, you get to pick where that fireball
Uh-huh.
detonates,
Uh-huh.
right? The woe version, harmful, the GM gets to pick, right? They could choose to have it centered on you if they think that's the best thing, but maybe they think, you know what, that's actually less fun because it kills the party, and I want the story to continue. I worked, since Thursday
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah.
I'd rather not end the party right now. I'm gonna go have that fireball go a couple spaces over to the left and hit that prominent politician, or the supporting pillars of the tavern you're in, right? And create a more
Hmm.
interesting story that way. But like as the GM, I get
Yeah.
to choose.
Yeah. It's a future
And
problem
then
for you and your party
yes,
rather than an imminent, immediate one,
yeah.
perhaps.
And then the neutral
Yeah.
version is that the fireball goes off in a location that's either decided by random chance or compromise. So either, the fastest way to do this is just you and the GM have a quick, like, 5-second conversation and say, like, hey, that seemed like a good space. Like, yeah, sure, that's net
Yep.
neutral for me. And we'll proceed with
Hmm.
that. Or if you can't agree, it's like flip a coin, roll a die, whatever you need to do to move the game forward. Um, but the point is, like, we've preserved the ability for you to
Yeah.
cast Fireball on yourself, but we've put in tools such that you're not obliged to. So if you don't
Yeah.
want that to be the way your
Yeah.
story proceeds, it doesn't have to be.
It's a little bit less party killing. Um, this does make me want to ask because I either it was completely in one ear out the other.
That's
Um,
fair.
who decides if it is wheel balanced or woe, and separately or like maybe as a follow up, what is the actual trigger? Like what would trigger this surge? Because
Oh,
for
this is
example,
great.
in D&D, right, it's some specific circumstances for the wild magic sorcerer, and you have to. I think rules is written. You have to roll a 1 on a
Mhm.
d20, and then there's home rules about sort of escalating the DC of that and such. But yeah. So who decides the wheel balanced or woe, or what mechanic decides that, and what mechanic decides a wild magic surge in the
So
reimagined
yeah,
version?
this is one of those other places where we're really leaving it up to you. And we're providing guidance
Mm,
because,
hmm.
again, we don't want it to be something where it's just like, oh, yeah, we've given you all these tools and have fun figuring it out. Like, we're going to give you guidance. I've got in the playtest document that's available right now on the Discord for VIPs, there's a table that says, hey, like, here's some estimated frequencies of if you use this dice size and like this is your
Uh huh.
threshold for getting a trigger, like, this is how often you'd expect wild magic to occur. And you can scale it up or down if you want. I
Cool.
have been playing around with a d20 being the decision for whether or not it's wheel balanced or woe,
Uh
with
huh.
each of them basically getting 7 or 6. Like 1 to 7 being woe, 8 to 13 being neutral, and
Uh
then
huh.
14
14 to
up
20.
being
Yeah.
wheel, with a possibility of saving 1 and 20 for crits.
Hmm.
Some fun things can happen there if you choose. But also, you could use a d6, you could use a d8, you could use a coin. You could
Sure.
say, you know what, it happens when a specific narrative thing in game happens. This is one of the things that I love, and one of the key points of making wild magic something that can be added to everything is that we're
Yeah.
not making assumptions that it has to be a spell
Right.
or a cantrip that causes wild magic. We've
Right.
absolutely still built it so that you can do that. I think most people will use it that way. Um,
Sure.
but like one of my favorite things is imagine a character who's cursed such that wild magic goes off every time they lie,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. That's
how
really
about
cool.
an eldritch being that causes a wild magic surge every time you say its name,
Hmm.
right? Or we could just have, yeah, you trigger wild magic every time you annoy the GM, right?
Hey,
It can be all of those things as above.
some of my games would never move forward, especially the ones with my
Yeah.
kids. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What I
So,
love to me, I think this ties back to what you're saying about providing people the tools to make it whatever they want it to be, rather than dictating
mhm.
this is the rules that I have made and it must be thus in this new system. But here are a plethora of options. Go nuts. Bring it to
Yes.
your game the way you want to.
Yeah. So the biggest trick with making sure that can be added to everything is there's two major things. And the first is really an exercise in restraint. One of the
Hmm.
things that keeps the 2014 Wild Magic table from being universally applicable is that there are effects in there that say things like you regain all of your meta magic points or your sorcery
Yeah.
points.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
useless for most people, right? And so it's not strictly possible to do it perfectly. There's going to be weird situations that people run into where
Sure.
something doesn't quite apply. But by and large, we've been trying really, really hard to make sure that all of the wild magic effects can be applied in a wide variety of situations and will be applicable to most people most of the
Hmm.
time. Right. So we're avoiding things that just
Yeah.
say you regain a spell slot because you might not have spell slots. You might not be a player character, right? Um,
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
If
exactly.
if if almost anything could trigger a surge depending on how people want to play it. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. That's really smart. I
Mhm.
and kind of sounds like a ton of work. Uh
There's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a
yeah.
lot of work still to do. But the
Yeah,
other big
totally.
thing,
Mm.
and this is where I think is some of the real like the extra sweetness to the wheel woe system that I hinted at before, is that because every effect has three variants, and because by default those variants add up to a net neutral, you can
Hmm.
add wild magic to anything. And it's not that it won't change anything about the balance of your game. Like, yeah, you're casting fireball more often or whatever else
Sure.
happens. Like your combat's gonna go differently, but you have a reasonable expectation of saying, like, I didn't just like accidentally boost this monster, right? There's an equal chance of things going in its
Yeah.
favor or against. It'll just happen
Yeah.
more often, right? So allowing the default to be net neutral lets GMs and players add wild magic to systems with confidence. At the same time, because every effect is balanced in itself. If you say, "Oh, this card summons goblins, and they actually went extinct like 2,000 years ago in my setting, and it would really cause some like lore questions to come up," you can just take it out, and it
Hmm.
won't affect the overall balance of the game table
Yeah.
because every card is net neutral, or every effect is net neutral. We do have
Yeah.
them on physical cards. This is a thing that I'm very excited about.
Awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, because like so many times, like I want people to customize the wild magic table. There's people on
Hmm.
the Discord already who are saying, like, I see your basic rules. I'm impatient for this to come out. I'm just going to use your system and write my stuff. Right? I love that.
That's
I'm
yeah.
excited for people to take the system in so many different directions, and I want it to be the case where if you're working with a 2014 Wild Magic table and you say, like, I don't like the fireball effect, but I'm worried that if I take it out, then the Wild Magic table is getting stronger and it's like a boost to the sorcerer or whatever.
Sure.
Like, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Instead, you just say, oh, you know what?
Yeah.
Your Wild Magic table has been a little bit strong lately. Let's increase the die range that you need to roll in order to get a woe effect. Right? And that's
Yeah.
it. And then like that can happen in the middle of the game. You don't have to pause the game or anything. You're saying like, "Oh yeah, you've had some poor luck recently." It's like, "Well, roll with advantage next time." Or, even like in game,
Yeah.
your character is like, "You know what? Like you've had this moment of reconciliation, like your heart is in order. Wild magic rolls with advantage for the next hour."
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is such a great expansion to the existing system. Yeah. Um yeah. I'm just like slightly the mental salivating as I'm thinking
Right?
about
You're
this and
starting
waiting
to
for
see
it.
like what
Oh
are the
yeah.
possibilities here.
Yeah.
Can I briefly tell you about like the possibility that just keeps tickling my brain?
Please do. Please do.
The wild magic character I really want to see. And if anyone out there is listening to this and creates this character and plays it, please let me know. I want to see a. I imagine it as a warlock cleric multiclass, but you could do it other ways. But
Okay.
basically, your wild magic set is going to be the combined set of the virtue and the corruption effects, the good and evil. Your character has, let's say like a sovereign deity, as well as a warlock patron who are vying for control, which is causing the wild magic to go awry. And as you make choices in the game, the DM can say, okay, you know what? That action puts you more on the line of, the warlock patron towards evil. The corruption effects are going to have a higher chance of getting of getting the fortune, and the virtue effects are going to be more likely to punish you.
I Yes. I love
right?
this
And
so
then that
much.
adjusts dynamically as you make decisions in the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. Amazing. Um, I I feel like that leads me to kind of ask to you a little more about these five different themes and how you imagine someone might choose a theme that best suits the story that they're trying to tell with that character or that the GM is trying to tell. Whereas we
Yeah,
talked
I'll
about
go over the
corruption and
themes a
virtue and
little
kind
bit
of
one
like
more time. We
yeah,
glanced over them briefly at the beginning there when I was giving
yeah.
introducing the concept. But basically, we've got I'll give them in alphabetical order because that's how I've been thinking about them. We've got corruption. These are our dark evil effects for our
Hmm.
edge lords out there. We've got stuff like dealing with undead and fiends and aberrations and shadows and letting your skin slough off your body and revealing bones below, right? And accidentally inflicting curses, right? All of that dark, edgy stuff, that's
Hmm.
going to fall under corruption, right? Then we've got growth. It's our classic nature gambit. All your beasts, your plants, your weather effects, those are going to get tied into the growth system. So like nature magic's pretty standard fare. Like we need
Yep.
something that hammers into that theme. Our next branch is intellect. Intellect is the mind bending stuff. This is stuff that breaks the rules of the game and makes you go, wait, what? How does that work?
Fun.
One of my favorite ones, which I admittedly stole from I forget exactly where, but we all steal lots of things.
All the time.
Is there's a intellect effect that says that for the next hour, instead of rolling a d20, you roll a 5d4 as your mind shatters into little pieces that have to coordinate with each other.
Horrifying and wonderful mechanic for illuminating that point.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another one that is
Great.
a little bit of a inside joke where a parallel universe briefly overlaps with yours. And basically, for the next minute, you run a very stripped down version of Powered by the Apocalypse instead,
Ha! I love it. That's really
right?
funny.
But there's also things like, we get like a lot of stuff dealing with space and time work in there.
Hmm.
I think one of the higher level effects is, casting time stop.
Yeah.
We've got our Misty Steps. Are things that like change the language that you speak. All those things that sort of are puzzling ultimately,
Right.
right? Are dealing with like the laws of the game.
Hmm.
Passion. This is going to be probably our most like traditional wild magic
Hmm.
set. This is, do you want things to explode? This is the set that makes things explode, right? A lot of our elemental effects are in here.
Yeah.
Things that deal with especially like different emotions or reflections of those emotions. So elements are really great for this because they like,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
talk about
Totally.
being hot with anger or, feeling cold towards someone,
Hmm.
right? And so like elemental magic is just a wonderful way to express that. And then it's also great because like you can use the other themes as ways of like sort of choosing which particular emotion you want to go with. It's like,
Right.
oh, so we're feeling joyful. It's like, well, let's go with like the passion virtue set, right?
Yeah.
Or feeling
Yeah.
spiteful, let's go with passion corruption,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and then finally, at the end, as we talked about, we've got virtue. This is our holy divine effects,
Right.
things for our clerics and paladins and our goody goody two shoes. And if that set of 5 flavors sounds familiar to you, you can keep your fat mouth shut. We scrubbed the serial numbers off of that so hard.
Ah.
Um, but
What serial numbers? I never saw no serial numbers. Fell off a truck.
yeah, but for those who have recognized the pattern here, that pattern is common in a lot of D&D source books
Hmm.
because of other properties that Wizards of the Coast owns. And this is not a book trying to be aligned with one of those properties, but I do want the people who are using that system already to be like,
Yeah.
oh, I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
this is going to slot in really nicely with the things that are already in place.
Totally. Okay. Silly question. The other classic of turning yourself into a potted plant remains, we hope. Sounds like it would slide into growth, perhaps, or something similar.
Yeah, so I haven't specifically included the potted plant one,
Fair enough.
but I have. I mean, but I'm also not finished finalizing everything. Like, there's
Hmm.
still time. It might not be the potted plant exactly. I do like the potted plant as a Easter egg referring to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. You got to love your little Easter eggs in there. Um,
Absolutely.
but what I have done is like in general, I'm trying not to use the same spell like as a wild
Yeah.
magic effect more than once. Because like I don't want people to think I'm lazy. Like there's a certain threshold where it's just like, casting fireball, like, okay, quick and easy, great. I'm glad to see it in here. But if everything is just like you cast a random spell, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, did you actually do work on
No.
this or was there any creativity involved at all? Um,
Fair
but
enough.
I have at this point in development included polymorph at least 5 times. I have
It's there's good reasons to have that in there. I would argue that it's not a I can respect the desire to have people be like, no, you really worked hard on this. And also,
Mhm.
there are some of those effects that are so
that are really versatile, right?
really versatile and classically and inextricably linked to wild magic conceptually.
Yeah, and
For me,
polymorph
at
is just
least.
like the
Yeah,
basic format of like you turn into another thing
yeah,
is a big one.
yeah.
So I have split them up so that if you're playing with one of the predefined sets, you're not likely to run into more than one or two of them at a time.
Hmm.
So you are still getting that variation. But each of the polymorph cards or polymorph effects has multiple variations within it for
Hmm.
what things you can turn into, right? So
Cool.
like basically, I put one of the polymorphs in each of like bridge sets between growth and the other flavors. So let me actually pull up my little draft document here and see just
Yeah,
kind of a hint. I have
yeah.
not shared this anywhere
Sneak
else, so we're
peeks.
getting exclusive previews here.
Exclusive sneak peeks. You will have to listen to the show for
Yeah,
these
exclusive until I go on to another
tidbits.
podcast and share it
Fair
there
enough.
too. But
We'll be
um,
first, damn it.
you will be first. So for example, like if we're going with the growth and virtue set,
Hmm.
like roll 1d4 for a badger, a cat, a deer, or an eagle. A creature within 120 feet of you is polymorphed into the result for 10 minutes. If they are in water, they're instead polymorphed into a seahorse. Versus, let's
Uh-huh.
take the growth and corruption set. Um, we've got roll 1d4, a bat, a frog, a rat, or a vulture.
Uh-huh.
A creature within 120
Uh-huh.
feet of you is polymorphed into the result for 10 minutes. If they're in water, they're instead polymorphed into a quipper,
I
right?
love
So
that.
like
Yeah.
I have in my like some of my advertisements. It's like, does your wild magic always polymorph you into a sheep? Like, we've all been a sheep at this point,
We've all been a sheep and a potted plant and cast fireball in our party.
right? And
Well,
it's time for just
now,
a little bit of variation there.
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, and then also, I've got plenty of other things that mess with you. I have a whole slew of effects that give you an additional creature type, as well as some additional
Wow.
benefits
Okay.
or drawbacks there. So let
Mm-hmm.
me find one or two of those to
Yeah.
give a sense of. Um, let's see here. Appreciate your patience.
Oh, I mean, of course. I'm so excited to hear about these. Like, absolutely.
Yeah, so here's one, and this is fairly high
Mm.
powered. It's in the virtue set. For the next 8 hours, you gain the celestial creature type. During this period, um, so if you get the wheel
Mm-hmm.
version, the good version,
Mm-hmm.
you may cast Revivify as a ritual without material components. Unlike normal, you may cast Revivify on creatures that have been dead for up to 1 hour.
Okay.
Harmful
Hell
or woe
yes.
effect. Your connection to this world becomes tenuous. If you are reduced to 0 hit points, you immediately die without making death saving throws, and your body is assumed to a higher plane after 1 hour.
Okay.
And then our
I
neutral
love
version is that both of those things happen.
I love how much higher stakes that is. Like exactly like you're talking about. Like that is something that should happen. Yes, yes. I'm feeling like slightly tongue tied at the moment, but like it has the feeling of something that should be happening to you when your wild magic is surging at higher levels, and the stakes of what you are able to do or what might happen to you are that much higher.
Yes.
Yeah,
hmm So
amazing.
then a similar one to just give one other example
Sure.
here. Let's go with um yeah, so here's one. I love the woe effect version on this one. For the next 8 hours, you gain the aberration creature type during this
Hmm.
period. Good version. You can communicate telepathically with creatures within 60 feet of you that speak at least one language.
Uh huh.
Bad version, your GM chooses one of the following effects. Either alien mouth, you must succeed on a constitution performance check to communicate orally or use the verbal components of spells. Or distorted limbs, you treat all weapons as one stage further on the following spectrum. And I'm going to use some terms that are a little bit different between the systems, but you should get the sense of what they are.
Mm.
Hand mounted, dual wielding, normal,
Hmm.
two handed to unusable. And you have
Uh-huh.
disadvantage on thrown weapon attacks.
Ah,
And then the neutral version is both of those things happen.
yeah. Yeah. Have some tentacle arms and try to do any of your
Right?
normal
And it's
things
just
with
like it
that.
takes like I can't
Yeah.
use this crossbow now because I don't know
Yeah.
how to use my arms.
I love that. Those are incredible effects. Yeah.
Thank you.
Really, really solid. Um, so I wonder what, I guess maybe while this document is open in front of you, if you can give us a brief overview of the new subclasses that you have built for the Reimagined system.
Yeah. So I will say that the subclasses are still very much in development. I'm
Sure.
getting like the tables that they're going to
Sure.
draw from down first, and then subclass development's going to come a little bit
Yeah.
later. That
But
being said,
the nutshell, the
I've
quick
got
elevator
overarching
pitch.
ideas here.
Yeah.
And basically the five subclasses that are demoed on the pre-sale page. I basically have one subclass to sort of be the poster child for each of the themes.
Hmm.
Is sort of the notion that we're going here.
Cool.
So to start with the virtue set, we have the Godsend Cleric. And the sort of the question with all of these is like, why do each of these kinds of magic go wild? Because they go
Mhm.
wild for different reasons.
Right.
And so, one of the questions is like, okay, there's like, a deity that loves peace and order. Like, why would their magic go wild? And sort of the notion that I've come to is that they go wild because there is a higher plan that you don't know, and you have to commit yourself to that kind of trust. And there are you give up some of the control of your power to let your deity act through of you in unexpected ways.
Hmm.
And so the Godsend Cleric is about like having those moments where like you've just defeated this the goblin camp, and then suddenly you accidentally cast Revivify on one of the goblins. Like, oh, your deity like needs them alive.
Uh-huh.
And like now that's a
Yeah.
story beat. And at the same time, there's also things where it's like, because we've got the Wheel Woe system, in fact, we can have abilities like Plead Mercy, where if you're about to get a wild magic effect, or possibly some other bad consequence, you can plead mercy and add a bonus to it to convert it into a
Hmm.
good version and turn that will around. Right.
Cool.
We then have the Wildskeeper Druid. Um, Growth is an easier one. It goes wild because it is wild, right?
It
Magic is
very.
intrinsically,
Yeah.
it doesn't care about you. It's going to do its own thing. The thing that I really want to play with the Wildskeeper Druid is Wild Magic Zones. And saying that like
Hmm.
wild magic is no longer just my problem.
Yeah.
We're going to make this whole
It's
area
that
into a
whole
wild
area
magic
over
zone.
there, everyone's problem.
And
Uh-huh.
our Wilds Druid will get a couple of benefits from like being that custodian of
Uh-huh.
this kind of wild energy.
Cool.
Right. I also very much want to have a system where you can get a bonus wild shape so long as you don't control what you turn into.
Ah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Right. And possibly even a little bit above what I'm considering doing is that you could possibly have a chance of rolling a wild form that is above what you normally can do, so long as the
Right.
average of your possibilities is equal to your normal restrictions.
Cool.
Right. And then like there's a whole possibility there for like coming up with like what's the custom table for your particular environment that you can make with your GM, as well as like having some preset ones so you don't have to do all that work yourself.
Yeah.
That's our basic notion there. Let's see. Moving down the list in alphabetical order by class, because that's how I'm thinking about it now. We have the Unbound Sorcerer. This is basically my chance to do the wild magic sorcerer the way that I
Do
think
it
it should be
right.
done.
Yeah, totally.
I hesitate to say do it right because, like, people, like, there's a reason the wild magic sorcerer is the iconic class it is.
Yeah.
I will say the thing that irks me about the wild magic sorcerer and that irks some other people is that, like, in both the 2014 version and the 2024 version, the wild magic sorcerer gets less random as you progress in level. It gets more and more control over its wild magic surges.
Yeah.
No, the wild magic sorcerer should get worse. Like more things should go crazy.
Sure.
Um, Wild magic should happen more as you progress in levels. I think there's also just an opportunity. One of the things that a lot of people have wanted from wild magic, and that's it's not the place for me to integrate into the reimagined system as a whole, is wild meta magic. And I can't do
Hmm.
that to the whole system without compromising my ability to add wild magic like
Right.
as any kind of
Sure.
prompt. But it's got to be in there somewhere. And like
Yeah.
wild magic sorcerer with wild meta magic, like this is the place to do it. I also love the idea of doing wild counterspell, where
Okay.
like yeah, we're gonna say like no, the spell that you were trying to cast is now a chicken, right? And that's a great way to like give them more power while increasing the amount of chaos that they
Yeah.
bring to the world,
Yeah.
not like toning it down, right?
Totally.
I think that the wild magic sorcerer, as it's been traditionally conceived, just has this paradoxical relationship with chaos, where like
I
they
mean,
keep
I
wanting wild magic to sort of be like a punishment, but it's not, and it's like objectively the reason that you play the subclass.
well, I mean, and I think what they have chosen specifically to do is give you the journey of I'm getting better at controlling it. It might still happen,
Exactly.
but I can make it happen more predictably. Which is, which is a valid story beat to hit if that is the one you want.
Hmm.
But given that within D&D, that's the only option for that story if you're trying to tell it.
Yeah. And maybe that's the story you want to tell. And like one of the things that I'm definitely going to do is that gives some conversion advice where it's like, hey, if you want to use these effects with the wild magic sorcerers that already exist, here's how you can create a table that's going to be functionally the same.
Yeah.
And in terms of balance, right? But I think there's opportunities for new expressions that play with
Hmm.
the system a little bit more.
Yeah. Totally.
So then we have the Dread Bargainer Warlock. We're working with there's our poster child for corruption, and like corruption magic has to go wrong because like you thought that you were in control,
Yeah.
but like the curse is bigger than you are, right? And the Dread Bargainer is all about making that Faustian bargain of like I want more power and I am willing to risk a debilitating curse in order to get it. Right? Let's upcast this a little bit past where we normally would be able to go. In exchange, we'll take the risk. Maybe it will pay
Hmm.
off, and maybe that additional curse will land on our enemies instead. But
Sure.
yeah, we've got to play
But
with that
well,
fantasy,
just take the
right?
chance, roll those dice. Yeah.
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 And then we have the Chaos Theorist Wizard, our poster child for intellect. And our notion here is wild magic is going wild because we're strategically breaking our magic just a little bit to see
Hmm.
what we can learn. So
Yeah.
I really love my big idea here is a chaos theorist should be able to basically catch a wild magic effect and say like, oh, I didn't know that magic could do that, but now I do, and I'm going to hold on to
Hmm.
that effect for later.
Hmm.
And like,
Cool.
now I basically,
Yeah.
have
I'm
what's
I'm like
functionally in
adding to
some
my
cases like
spell
a new
book as I
spell.
discover these things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and some of them
totally.
will be replications of spells. Some of them are things
Hmm.
that aren't accessible as spells at all, right?
Hmm.
And then you
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
creativity and the fun little mini game of like, is it worth like should I trade this out versus like how many things can I hold at a given time? So lots of fun things there. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are the among the five subclasses included in the
Yeah.
book, and yeah, we're definitely not missing
Incredible.
any. I'm definitely not withholding anything, as secret reveals later.
Definitely not. Of course not. Definitely not
There's
things that people
definitely
should be following this Kickstarter and paying
right,
attention and perhaps
absolutely. There's
backing
definitely
it.
not a major spellcaster class that I've left out for no
Yeah.
reason.
Well, just in case there were to possibly hypothetically be some secret things that would be revealed only to backers, where would people go if they wanted to find out more and potentially give you money for this incredible new wild magic system?
Yeah, so the best place to go is our pre-sale page. That's going to be presale.speaksandspells.com. There's going to be a link in the show notes.
There
Thank you
will
so much
absolutely
for
be.
providing that.
Of
Um,
course.
and we
Always
should
worth mentioning.
mention, so
Mm,
not only can you get a little bit more information just on the pre-sale page itself, you can sign up for email updates so you'll know exactly when we go live. You also have the ability, if you put down $1 as a little advance pledge, we will throw in a bonus wheel/woe coin into any physical pledge that you get. If we're planning on selling it for $10 during the campaign, it's $1 right now, and you get a bonus invitation to be a VIP member of the Discord server. You can be a normal member as well. That invitation is available, and we'll put the normal member invitation in the show notes as well.
We will.
But if you become a VIP, you're going to get some early access to playtest documents. You're going to be able to vote on some polls that I'm putting out. Yeah, there's also just a whole bunch of little opportunities to chat and meet other people in the community and bounce ideas off. Yeah, we haven't defined all of the things that we're doing for VIPs, but I love the things that we are already doing for VIPs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really helps me because that really helps me know that we're going to have sufficient backers and sufficient market to put this thing out there into the world. Because it's a big risk I'm doing. I'm shooting for the moon here and really trying to do something that is a step beyond anything I've ever done. So I really appreciate it. If you don't choose to be a VIP, I'm still so thrilled that you've taken interest in the project.
I know a lot of people that love Wild Magic, and I think are going to be extremely, extremely excited.
And hopefully they love shiny little coins as well.
Right? I mean, again, who doesn't? Most of us are magpies at heart, truly. Clarke, I think it's time to ask the extremely, extremely important question.
Oh, whatever.
What is your favorite class favorite class and subclass? And multiple answers always acceptable because it's hard to narrow it down sometimes.
Okay. I believe the answer is going to be yes here, but can I give an answer that is outside of the traditional D&D options?
Absolutely. I just want to know about it. Yeah.
My favorite class is the redheaded stepchild of Level Up Advanced 5th Edition, the Savant. The Savant was included in a setting guide that was like half shoehorned into Level Up, like sort of partway through development. And so it like some of the class features didn't get like fully integrated into like the system that the way the other revised classes did. But the premise for the Savant is basically you are a really smart person and you are clever enough to just get away with stuff.
Brilliant.
And it answers the desire of my heart, which is that sometimes I just want to be a smart person who doesn't have to cast spells, right? So
to think your way out of the situation and out of whatever you've gotten yourself into.
Yeah. So the spiritual like heart of the Savant is from the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies. If you think about how Sherlock Holmes works there, like that's the Savant. Other like sort of touchstones from popular culture, you can go with like Milo from the Atlantis movie, Indiana Jones. I would say the Doctor from Doctor Who.
Very much.
Could be a Savant, right? Someone whose ultimate thing is about like using their intellect in order to get their way through problems. So mechanically, the Savant focuses on having a lot of little combat tricks that they pull. So it's got things like I'm going to identify an opportunity and I'm going to tell an ally about it. So that they can have an advanced shot. Or I'm going to say, like, I'm going to use my knowledge of anatomy and I'm going to hit you in a pressure point so that your leg doesn't work anymore. Right?
I love this. I love this so much. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things to me that it immediately says it's the small abilities from several different debatably martial classes, kind of like Mastermind Rogue and kind of like some of the battle master maneuvers even, but like having it just be the sole focus of this class is using your brain. That's so cool.
Yeah. But then where it really sings is as a skill monkey. Like the Savant is very, very good at out of combat utility. To the point that like for being a class that probably doesn't pull its full weight in combat a lot of times, it does pretty well. It holds up like pretty well, but it's not, going to be the wizard casting Meteor Swarm, right?
Sure.
The Savant sometimes just feels broken outside of combat in terms of like how good they are at just like, oh, the DC is what, 28? No problem.
Yep. Yeah, I'm regularly getting 30. Enjoy.
Yes.
I love doing that. I love finding the ways to do that I found a couple within other systems, but the idea of a whole class that is just built to do that itself makes me very happy.
Yes. So, sort of possibly in a segue into the next
Hmm.
part, as
Yeah.
a designer in the level up ecosystem, and as someone who really latched on to the Savant, there are at present, and I checked this before the show, 14 published Savant subclasses available through both official and unofficial
Okay.
channels. I wrote 8 of them.
Ah, I love that.
And on
You've
top of
written
that,
more
I have
than
also written
50%.
additional class features for them. Yeah. And so those 8 are part of a set as well. They're part of my academic exemplars set. And basically, each of them takes as a single skill and says, like, what if I just want to be really, really good at that skill? So we've got from anyone from D&D is going to recognize nature, arcana, religion, and history.
Hmm.
We've also got investigation and then medicine. Not usually an intelligence skill, but like, come on, you got to have like
Yeah.
a physician in there.
Yeah.
And then level up advanced fifth edition introduces 2 additional intelligence skills: engineering and culture. And so
Hmm.
I have made a savant subclass for each of those that says like I am an expert in that field, and I do really really well at it. Um, so for example, like I really like the diplomat is the expert in culture, and they do a lot of things
Hmm.
with saying like, oh, your persuasion and deception rolls and things use intelligence,
Uh-huh.
right? So like you get to play that fantasy of like being the smartest person in the room and talking your way out of situations. Um, or we've of course got like the Indiana Jones archaeologist who specializes in history and who's like our dungeon delver. But I
Yeah.
think of those of the ones that I've made, I think the naturalist ends up being my favorite. It was one of the earlier ones that I did, and it was one that I spent a long time trying to crack, and I felt like I really did crack it. And it was also the first subclass that I ever got to play that I made.
That's
So it
got to
was
be a
just a really
really
special
exciting
moment
and
for
fun
me.
moment. Yeah, absolutely.
But the best part about it is just like the naturalist, as you might expect, is really, really good at making nature checks. Which
Hmm.
meant that as I'm going through like my friend's one shot, I'm constantly asking, like, here's a problem in front of me. How do I turn it into a science problem so that I can roll a nature check about it and get some kind of advantage here? Which is like, so not,
Uh-huh.
it's a wonderful little marriage of like what my character is doing and what I'm doing, where it's like my character is being
Yeah.
really intelligent and like getting information out of this because they've studied. And I get to play this game of like, how do I get to be creative and find
Yeah.
a clever way around this?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that is fantastic. I love that. I feel like we will also have links to the academic exemplars because that sounds dope and people should check it out.
I mean, also I think they're all available on A5E tools.
Amazing.
They're always on a little bit of a delay, so the engineer and the physician might not be out yet. But let me
Uh-huh.
check. They may have posted them by now.
Amazing. Uh
The engineer and the physician are not yet free, but maybe
okay.
who knows? Maybe by the time this is posted, they'll be
Maybe
free.
well, you know what?
But I can also show you where to get them.
We'll put all the links in there anyway. You know, I am so excited about this. I think the only thing I have left to do is to again say, people, go check out presale.speaksandspells.com. Did I get that right? It was, or was it in one ear and
Yeah,
out the
we're
other?
gonna do also. I will mention like there's gonna be a little custom link in the show notes that will just help me.
There
with
will be
tracking.
that.
So if you're gonna use anything, like I'd love for you to use the custom link, but also I'd rather
Please
just have
do.
you go to the thing if you're gonna get there some way or another.
Check out
presale.speaksandspells.com. If you search for Wild Magic Reimagined, will be like the first 4 results. I think something like that.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, and then there's a Discord link as well.
Yeah. Check out the Speaks and Spells, get Wild Magic Reimagined and bring it into the world because the world needs more wild magic. I normally ask where people can find you, but I think I'm going to say if you want to find Clarke, you should check out Gate Pass Gazette, maybe check out A5E Tools, look for all the amazing stuff you published, and check out the Discord link that will be in the show notes. I think that's the place to say if
Basically, yeah, Drive Through RPG also has a Speaks and Spells publishing page.
Yeah. But check those out. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear,
you so
you
much.
can absolutely Listening friends, don't forget to follow The Roll Report. We are at The Roll Report Cast on many socials, where you'll get sneak peeks of upcoming interviews and things. And if you really like what you hear, then you can support us on Patreon. That would be super cool too, at patreon.com/The Roll Report. Sometimes I think there's something else I'm supposed to say, but I can't remember, so I can't imagine there is. Clarke,
I'm sure
thank you so much for joining
insightful.
me. You give me far too much credit, but I appreciate it nonetheless. And thank you so much for joining me.
But thank you so much. It was such a privilege to be here and so much fun.
I'll take that. I'll take that to the bank. Listeners, get Wild Magic Reimagined, bring some more Wild Magic into your life, and keep rolling dice or other things as it might be. Until next time.